Welcome to my channel, The Good Book Tales. In today's video, we are diving into one of the most powerful and dramatic stories in the New Testament, the full story of Apostle Peter. From the moment he was called as a simple fisherman by the Sea of Galilee to his final days as a faithful martyr in Rome, Peter's journey is one of transformation, failure, courage, and redemption. His life is not just a story about a man who lived 2,000 years ago. It is the story of how an ordinary person, with flaws and fears just like us, was changed forever by an extraordinary calling. Picture this: the waves of the Galilee lapping against wooden boats, fishermen pulling in their nets after a long, weary night with almost nothing to show for it. Among them is Simon, later to be called Peter. He is rough-handed, strong from labor, but also restless, searching for something more. He has no idea that his life is about to collide with Jesus of Nazareth, a teacher who would see in him more than just a fisherman. In that moment, Peter had no idea that he was about to become the rock upon which the early church would be built. But Peter's story is not a straight path of greatness. It's a story full of struggles and contradictions. He was bold enough to step out onto stormy waters when Jesus called, yet fearful enough to sink when doubt overtook him. He was the first to declare that Jesus was the Messiah, yet also the one who denied him 3 times in his darkest hour. These contradictions make Peter more than a saintly figure from stained glass windows. They make him real, human, relatable. His journey is a mirror of our own battles between faith and fear, courage and weakness. Throughout history, the name of the Apostle Peter has stood as a symbol of both frailty and strength. He was the fisherman who became a disciple, the disciple who became a leader, and the leader who became a martyr. From the bustling villages of Galilee to the crowded streets of Jerusalem, and finally to the heart of the Roman Empire, Peter's footsteps can be traced across the world of the first century. His words, his letters, and his unwavering faith shaped the foundations of Christianity as we know it today. But Peter's life was not just about miracles and preaching. It was about choices under pressure, risks that seemed impossible, and moments where fear almost won. Imagine the tension of being hunted, the weight of leading a new movement when powerful authorities wanted to crush it, and the heartbreak of knowing that following Jesus could cost you everything, including your life. This is the world Peter lived in, and this is the story we're about to walk through step by step. So how did a fisherman from Galilee become one of the most influential men in history? How did he move from denying Jesus in fear to boldly declaring his name before rulers and kings? And what final act of faith sealed Peter's place in history forever? The answers are coming, but not yet. Because to truly understand the ending, we first have to walk through the storms, the trials, and the moments that tested Peter's soul to the very core. Stay with me, because Peter's journey is about to unfold. Peter's journey begins long before he ever heard the voice of Jesus calling from the shore. He was born into the rhythms of fishing life along the Sea of Galilee, a world defined by hard work, long nights, and uncertain rewards. The lake was everything: food, livelihood, and survival. Men like Peter and his brother Andrew spent their days mending torn nets, pushing heavy boats into the water, and braving storms that could rise without warning. It was not a glamorous life, but it was steady, and it was all they knew. Yet beneath the surface of that ordinary routine lay an emptiness, a hunger for something more than fish and nets. Many in Galilee felt the same way. They were waiting for change, waiting for freedom, waiting for hope. The land itself was under Roman rule, and every man carried the weight of empire on his back. Taxes were high, soldiers were everywhere, and whispers of rebellion passed quietly from village to village. Life was fragile, uncertain, and dangerous. In that climate of tension, some turned to the hope of a Messiah, a promised deliverer who would restore their people and bring justice. It was into this setting that Jesus walked, speaking words unlike anyone had heard before. And it was in this setting that Peter first heard him say, "Follow me." For Peter, that call was more than an invitation. It was a disruption. Imagine leaving behind not just a job, but an entire way of life. To step out of the boat was to step into the unknown, into a journey that had no guarantees. Still, something about Jesus stirred Peter's heart. This teacher spoke with authority, healed the sick, calmed storms, and even challenged the powerful leaders of the day. Peter was drawn in, fascinated and unsettled at the same time. But following Jesus was never going to be easy. The closer Peter walked with him, the higher the stakes became. Crowds gathered, enemies grew angrier, and rumors spread like wildfire. Every miracle drew attention, but it also drew danger. For Peter, it meant living at the edge of wonder and fear, constantly watching as his teacher both amazed and provoked. And deep inside, Peter wrestled with who this man truly was. Could he really be the Messiah? Could he be the one to change everything? That tension never left Peter's side. He was bold one moment and uncertain the next, ready to fight, yet quick to stumble. Still, Jesus saw something in him, something even Peter himself could not yet see. And as the story unfolds, that hidden strength would be tested in ways Peter never imagined. Peter's journey begins long before he ever heard the voice of Jesus calling from the shore. He was born into the rhythms of fishing life along the Sea of Galilee, a world defined by hard work, long nights, and uncertain rewards. The lake was everything: food, livelihood, and survival. Men like Peter and his brother Andrew spent their days mending torn nets, pushing heavy boats into the water, and braving storms that could rise without warning. It was not a glamorous life, but it was steady, and it was all they knew. Yet beneath the surface of that ordinary routine lay an emptiness, a hunger for something more than fish and nets. Many in Galilee felt the same way. They were waiting for change, waiting for freedom, waiting for hope. The land itself was under Roman rule, and every man carried the weight of empire on his back. Taxes were high, soldiers were everywhere, and whispers of rebellion passed quietly from village to village. Life was fragile, uncertain, and dangerous. In that climate of tension, some turned to the hope of a Messiah, a promised deliverer who would restore their people and bring justice. It was into this setting that Jesus walked, speaking words unlike anyone had heard before. And it was in this setting that Peter first heard him say, "Follow me." For Peter, that call was more than an invitation. It was a disruption. Imagine leaving behind not just a job, but an entire way of life. To step out of the boat was to step into the unknown, into a journey that had no guarantees. Still, something about Jesus stirred Peter's heart. This teacher spoke with authority, healed the sick, calmed storms, and even challenged the powerful leaders of the day. Peter was drawn in, fascinated and unsettled at the same time. But following Jesus was never going to be easy. The closer Peter walked with him, the higher the stakes became. Crowds gathered, enemies grew angrier, and rumors spread like wildfire. Every miracle drew attention, but it also drew danger. For Peter, it meant living at the edge of wonder and fear, constantly watching as his teacher both amazed and provoked. And deep inside, Peter wrestled with who this man truly was. Could he really be the Messiah? Could he be the one to change everything? That tension never left Peter's side. He was bold one moment and uncertain the next, ready to fight yet quick to stumble. Still, Jesus saw something in him, something even Peter himself could not yet see. And as the story unfolds, that hidden strength would be tested in ways Peter never imagined. The closer Peter walked with Jesus, the more dangerous the journey became. What began with quiet gatherings by the lake shore grew into crowds pressing in, desperate to hear every word, desperate to see every sign of power. With every healing and every teaching, Jesus was not only changing lives, he was also drawing the eyes of Rome and the fury of religious leaders. Peter felt the tension rising like a storm on the horizon, and though he tried to stay strong, he could sense that something was coming, something that would test them all. In those final days, the city of Jerusalem pulsed with unrest. The air was thick with expectation, as pilgrims flooded in for the feast, and rumors of revolt stirred in every corner. Peter followed closely, torn between pride and fear, watching as Jesus rode into the city to the sound of cheering crowds. For a moment it felt like victory was near, but beneath the celebration, shadows moved. The leaders were plotting, and the weight of their anger was closing in. Night fell, and with it came the moment Peter had long feared but could not escape. Soldiers marched through the darkness, armed with authority, and the garden where they prayed was filled with shouts and torches. Peter, driven by loyalty, drew his sword, but his courage faltered as chains were placed on his teacher's hands. The man he had sworn to follow, the one he called Messiah, was being taken away like a criminal. Confusion, fear, and dread pressed in on Peter. The courtyard fire burned low as he lingered in the shadows, his heart pounding, his faith trembling. Questions came, voices demanding to know where he stood. Would Peter stay true to the man he had followed so far, or would fear claim him in this darkest hour? The courtyard was heavy with whispers and the glow of firelight, and Peter's heart raced as he tried to stay unseen. But the questions came quickly, sharper than the chill in the night air. A servant girl looked at him closely and said she recognized him as one of the disciples. Panic surged through Peter. Fear tightened his chest, and before he could think, the words slipped from his mouth. "I don't know him." It was only the beginning. 2 more times voices rose from the crowd, pressing him, accusing him of being one of the followers of Jesus. Each time Peter denied it, louder, more desperate, until the sound of a rooster crowing cut through the night. That sound crushed him. The memory of Jesus' warning flooded back. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." In that instant, Peter realized what he had done. The bold fisherman, the disciple who swore he would never abandon his teacher, had broken under the weight of fear. His strength, his confidence, his loyalty, all of it had failed in the very moment it mattered most. Peter slipped away into the night, weeping bitterly, torn apart by regret. But the story did not stop there. While Peter was drowning in guilt, another storm was rising. Jesus was condemned and led away to die, and the movement Peter had given everything to seemed to collapse in a single day. The disciples scattered, hiding from the authorities, afraid they might be next. Peter carried not only the fear of capture, but also the unbearable weight of his denial. How could he ever face the others again? How could he ever face himself? And yet, even in that lowest point, the conflict was not finished, because soon rumors began to spread. Whispers that the tomb was empty, that Jesus had risen. For Peter, the news was both terrifying and electrifying. Could it be true? Could the teacher he denied still be alive? If so, what would that mean for Peter, the one who had failed him so completely? The thought filled him with both hope and dread. The stakes had never been higher. Peter was caught between the crushing shame of his past and the possibility of a future he could hardly believe. The man who once walked on water now stood on the edge of a decision that would change everything. Would he step forward into forgiveness and destiny? Or would his failure define him forever? The answer was coming, but the path toward it was filled with twists no one expected. Peter's world turned upside down when he saw the empty tomb with his own eyes. The stone rolled away, the grave clothes folded, the silence of a place that should have held death. Everything pointed to a truth too great to ignore. And then came the moment that shattered his doubt forever. Jesus stood before him, alive. For Peter, it was both joy and agony. Joy because the teacher he loved was not gone. Agony because he still carried the weight of denial, the bitter memory of his failure by the fire. But Jesus did not turn him away. On the shore of Galilee, with the smell of charcoal fire in the air, Peter was asked not once but 3 times, "Do you love me?" It was no accident. Each question reached into the wound left by his 3 denials, and each answer allowed Peter to step back into grace. "Feed my sheep," Jesus told him, giving him not only forgiveness but also responsibility. In that moment, Peter was restored. The fisherman who once trembled in fear was now called to lead with courage. From that point forward, the story of Peter became a story of boldness. He preached in Jerusalem, healed the sick in the name of Jesus, and faced imprisonment without backing down. The man who once sank beneath the waves now stood unshaken in front of crowds and rulers. His voice carried across cities, declaring that Jesus was alive. Each risk brought greater danger, but also greater power in his witness. And yet, the path of faith led him to Rome, the very heart of the empire that sought to silence the followers of Jesus. There, Peter faced the greatest test of all. The same man who once denied his teacher now stood firm, refusing to renounce his Lord, even under threat of death. The climax of his journey was not just in the words he spoke, but in the life he gave. His martyrdom was the final proof of his transformation, from fisherman to leader, from cowardice to courage, from denial to devotion. But even here, a twist remained. Peter, unwilling to be executed in the same manner as Jesus, asked to be crucified upside down. It was his final act of humility, his way of saying that he was not worthy to die as his Lord had died. And in that upside-down cross, the story of Peter reached its peak, tragic yet triumphant, marked by suffering yet overflowing with hope. Peter's final breath in Rome was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a legacy that would echo across centuries. His journey from the shores of Galilee to an upside-down cross showed that faith is not about perfection, but perseverance. He stumbled, he failed, he denied, yet he was lifted up, forgiven, and transformed into a pillar of strength for the early church. That is why the name of the Apostle Peter remains one of the most recognized in Christian history. His life speaks not of flawless devotion, but of grace meeting weakness and turning it into courage. For the disciples who survived him, Peter's sacrifice was both heartbreaking and inspiring. They remembered the man who once dropped his nets without hesitation, who dared to step onto the water, who proclaimed boldly that Jesus was the Christ. They also remembered the man who wept bitterly at his denial, but who rose again to lead with unmatched passion. His life carried all the contradictions of human nature, and yet, through it all, he never stopped following. That is why his story continues to be told. Not just as history, but as a living example of what it means to be changed by faith. Even today, the legacy of Peter shapes communities around the world. His letters remain part of the New Testament, offering wisdom, encouragement, and reminders of perseverance in the face of trials. Churches bear his name, cities honor his memory, and millions look to his story for strength. The fisherman became a leader, the denier became a witness, and the broken man became a symbol of unshakable faith. The story of Apostle Peter reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. It teaches us that failure does not have to be the final word, and that even the weakest moments can become the foundation for the greatest callings. Most of all, it leaves us with a simple yet powerful truth. Ordinary people can live extraordinary lives when they answer the call to follow. And so, the tale comes full circle. From the nets of Galilee to the heart of Rome, Peter's life reveals the cost of discipleship and the reward of faith. His story is not just about one man, but about the possibility within us all to be transformed. The fisherman who became the rock has finished his race, but his voice still calls us to step forward, to believe, and to live with the same courage that carried him to the very end.